Vigyaswara Tenne Brahma Vrudaya Adikavaye Mujantija Suraya Tejo Varim Rida Jata Vinimajo Jatra Trisargamusa Dhamna Swena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyang Paramdi Mahi
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
From my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universe.
Of the creation, sustenance, destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji.
The original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is placed into as one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
As one is bewildered by illusory representations.
Of water seen in fire or land seen in water.
Of water seen in fire or land seen in water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Temporarily manifested by reactions of the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Which is forever free from the illusory representation.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita karchavocha.
Dharma prujita katavutta.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Paramo nirmatsaranam.
Vedyam vastavamatra vastu.
Vedyam vastavamatra vastu.
Shivadam tapa trayanmulanam.
Shivadam tapo trayanmulanam.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Kim va parir ishwaraha.
Kim va parir ishwaraha.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate-tra.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate-tra.
Krite bihi sususubhistakshana.
Completely
rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially
motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
It is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
By this culture of knowledge.
By this culture of knowledge.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam.
Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam.
Sukamukad amrita dravya samyutam.
Sukamukad amrita dravya samyutam.
Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Muhur aho raska bhuvibhavaka.
Muhur aho rasika bhuvibhavaka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
The mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literature.
It emanated from the lips of Shri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shri Sukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all.
Including liberated souls.
Including liberated souls.
Shanvatam Swakata Krishna.
Shanvatam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Vidyantaksto hi abhadrani.
Vidyanto hi abhadrani.
Vidunoti Srihits.
Vidu Noti Surit Satam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Vedic
or to
literatures,
hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad
is
Gita,
itself righteous activity.
is self-righteous
And for one who
activity.
hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna dwelling within everyone's
acts
heart,
as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing
and
friend,
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the body constantly engaged in hearing with him.
Nasta presu bhadresu
Nasta Praisha Bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttamasloki
bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki.
In this way,
In this way,
a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental
As
knowledge.
he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees,
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
become fixed devotion service to the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Rajastamo Bhava
kamalobodayaschaye
Kamalobhadayas
cheta etar anavidam
Chaitaitaranavidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
Stitam Sarve Prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes free from the mode of passion
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and thus material lust and avarice are
Evam
diminished.
prasana manaso
Evam Prasana Manasu
bhagavad bhakti yogataha
Bhagavad Bhakti
bhagavad
Yogata
tattva vijnanam
Tattva
mukta
Vijnanam
sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangasya Jayati.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When his impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in the position of pure goodness,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis
Vidyate Vidya Grantis,
chidyante sarvasamsaya
Chidyante Sarva Samchaya,
siyante chasya karmani
Chidyante Sasakamani,
yusta evatmanishwari.
Ruta Evanmanishwari.
Thus bhakti yoga severs the heart not of material affection
Thus the Bhakti was service a harm of material affection,
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables us to come at once to the stage of Samsham Samagrama.
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
Understanding the supreme absolute true personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, verse number 20. Nabhyam stitam hrid adiropyatasmad udanagat yorasitam nayan muni
Udanagatyurasitam nayin muni
tato nusandaya diyamanasvi
Tato nusandaya diyamanasvi
swatamulam sanakair nayeta.
Swatalumulam sanakai nayita.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from the navel to the heart, from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. There are 6 circles of the movement of the life air, and the intelligent bhakti yogi should search out these places with intelligence and in a meditative mood. Among these, mentioned above, is the Swadhisthana chakra, or the powerhouse of the life air. And above this, just below the abdomen and navel, is the Mani Puraka chakra. When upper space is further searched out in the heart, one reaches the Anahata chakra. And further up, when the life air is placed at the root of the palate, one reaches the Visuddhi chakra. So we see that we are trying to explore this planet and other planets, but we haven't really explored our own body. Very strange thing. And therefore, yoga is an internal process, and as we've explained previously, it's focused mainly on the mind. because controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind, as Arjuna says in Bhagavad Gita. So, how to control the mind? Well, there's a mechanical process, and there is a spiritual process. The mechanical process is described here as the different stages of yoga: yama, niyama, asana, and pratyahara, and so forth, all the way up to samadhi. And there are different mechanical exercises that one does to bring the mind under control. So that is the mechanical process, which, frankly speaking, hardly anyone can actually do in Kali Yuga, because we are constantly surrounded by things that divert our attention from self-realization to self-indulgence. However, the spiritual process, as taught by Lord Chaitanya, chanting Hare Krishna continually and fixing the mind on Krishna by respecting his holy prasadam, by going out on Sankirtan and dancing and singing the glories of the Lord, and regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam, and engaging in practical, time-sensitive devotional service. This is another way, and actually a more happy way of controlling the mind. Either you make the mind a blank, which is almost impossible, or you fill the mind with transcendental ecstasies of serving Krishna, which is possible for everyone. So this yoga practice, or mechanical yoga practice, if it's meant to understand Krishna, is also a type of, you could also say it's infused with bhakti. But if the goal is to deny Krishna, and we said that the original cancel culture started thousands of years ago with Mayavad philosophy. Cancel culture is you cancel things that are valid and truthful and replace them with things that are false. So right now in the United States, they're trying to cancel, there's a large group of people trying to cancel the history of the United States by tearing down statues or memorial things. They even tear down statues of Jesus Christ. So that's called cancel culture. You cancel things that have existed for a long time. Well, the original cancel culture began with the Mayavad philosophy. They canceled Krishna as a person. You see. So, and that has a very serious consequence. If you cancel Krishna, cancel Vaikuntha, cancel Goloka, cancel Nanda Maharaj, Yasoda Mai, cancel the cowherd boys, cowherd girls, cancel the cows, cancel that whole culture of Krishna consciousness, you end up keeping people's minds focused on material sense gratification. Because basically you're saying there's no sense gratification in the spiritual world, therefore you better take advantage of it now while you can get it, because you're not going to get it there in the spiritual world where there is no Vaikuntha, there are no planets, there's no Krishna's past, eternal pastimes. So all they do is just increase the attention to sex life and sense gratification. And that's why so many people fall down. They do yoga for an hour a day, and then they have sex at night. So this type of Mayavad philosophy encourages sense gratification in the material world. It doesn't purify a person. But if the yoga practice has the aim of obtaining Krishna, then that would make it, it's infused with bhakti, then it is a type of bhakti yoga, right? So let's look up the definition. Let's see. Look up the definition of yoga. again. Huh? It's very interesting to hear how yoga is defined in the dictionary as opposed to what is being said here. Yeah.
It is a Hindu spiritual and ascetic discipline, a part of which, including breath control, simple meditation, and the adoption of specific bodily postures, is widely practiced for health and relaxation.
Yeah. Now, does that sound like the definition of yoga? No, there's not one mention of Krishna there, you see. So this is called cancel culture. They canceled out Krishna a long time ago, thousands of years ago, actually, and they're still doing it today. Okay, well, now let's compare that to the statements that we have read already. One second. Okay, so in text 16 that we read some days ago, it says, the Lord and his service are identical, being on the absolute plane. Therefore, the unalloyed intelligence and the mind are merged into the Lord, and thus the living entity does not remain a seer himself, but becomes seen by the Lord transcendentally. When the living entity is directly seen by the Lord dictates to him to act according to his desire, and when the living entity follows him perfectly, the living entity ceases to discharge any other duty for his illusory satisfaction. In his pure unalloyed state, the living being attains a stage of full bliss, labdhu pashanti, and ceases all material hankerings. That's a definition. That's an explanation of what happens when one has Krishna as the goal of yoga practice. And also, previous to that, it says, the functions of the mind are thinking, feeling, and willing. When the mind is materialistic or absorbed in material contact, it acts for material advancement of knowledge, destructively ending in discovery of nuclear weapons. But when the mind acts under spiritual urge, it acts wonderfully for going back home, back to Godhead, for life in complete bliss and eternity. Therefore, the mind has to be manipulated by good and unalloyed intelligence. Perfect intelligence is to render service unto the Lord. One should be intelligent enough to understand that the living being is, in all circumstances, a servant of the circumstances. Every living being is serving the dictates of desire, anger, lust, illusion, insanity, and enviousness. So, cancel culture, when you cancel Krishna, that's due to enviousness. It's not due to love of God. It's due to enviousness of God. So you cancel God, and you end up with a definition like we just read of yoga, which has nothing to do with yoga. The whole purpose of yoga is to understand Krishna. In fact, yoga means connecting to Krishna. But even while executing such dictations of different temperaments, he is perpetually unhappy. When one actually feels this and turns his intelligence to inquiring about it from the right sources, he gets information of the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So that's what we do here. We give people information about the transcendental loving service of the Lord, as opposed to the mechanical process of yoga, in which, anyway, the definition of it purposely keeps you from going back to Krishna. Instead of serving materially for the above-mentioned different humors of the body, meaning lust, anger, greed, illusion, insanity, and enviousness, the living entity's intelligence then becomes freed from the unhappy illusion of materialistic temperament. Materialistic temperament means sex desire. And thus, and a desire to dominate and exploit nature and people. So, therefore, and thus, by unalloyed intelligence, the mind is brought into the service of the Lord. That's the whole point of yoga, to bring the mind into the service of the Lord. So this is correct psychology. And what we heard by the definition of yoga, the false definition, it is wrong psychology. It leads to psychology of being a demon. So, this Mayavad philosophy is dangerous in many other ways. It says, for the impersonalists, the ultimate goal or destination is the Brahmajyoti of the spiritual sky. But for the devotees, the ultimate goal is the Vaikuntha planets. The devotees experience the above-mentioned state of affairs by attainment of spiritual forms for activity in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. But the impersonalist, because of his neglecting the association of the Lord, does not develop a spiritual body for spiritual activity, but remains a spiritual spark only, merged in the effulgent spiritual rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is the full-fledged form of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, but the formless Brahmajyoti is simply eternity and knowledge. The Vaikuntha planets are also forms of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and therefore the devotees of the Lord who are admitted into the abode of the Lord also get bodies of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. So the Mayavadis never get this because they canceled Krishna out of the definition of yoga, you say. And therefore they fall down, even though they may, very few of them of course, may obtain the Brahmajyoti effulgence as a spiritual spark, but not having a specific body to serve Krishna. Therefore, they do not attain ananda, or genuine bliss. They fall down eventually, come back again to the material world. So it says, the Vaikuntha planets are also forms of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and therefore the devotees of the Lord who are admitted into the abode of the Lord also get bodies of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. As such, there's no difference between one and another. The Lord's abode, name, fame, entourage, etc., are of the same transcendental quality, and how this transcendental quality differs from the material world is explained herewith in this verse. In the Bhagavad Gita, the three principal subjects have been explained by Lord Sri Krishna, namely Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. But one can reach the Vaikuntha planets by the practice of Bhakti Yoga only. The other two are incompetent in helping one reach the Vaikuntha lokas, although they can, however, conveniently take one to the effulgent Brahmajyoti as described above. So here we see that there are many misleaders in this world. These are phony gurus that don't give the right information to people. And there's a description of this. He says, the Mayavadis and the mental speculators and the materialistic people, they create artificial perplexity, artificial confusion. And what does that mean? In the matter of transcendental understanding, by wasting time in discussing what is Brahman and what is non-Brahman, or Maya. Nor, that's point one, they create unnecessary perplexity. Point two, they falsely think of themselves as one with the Lord. How can you be one with the Lord? You don't become the Lord by some yoga practice, but this is what they say. They say at one point, they say, Jiva becomes Paramatma, or Atma becomes Paramatma. This is Mayavad philosophy. And number three, or they argue that there's no existence of the Lord separately. In other words, we are the Lord. It's not that he's a separate person, right? And then, or they say that there's no God at all. Or they say that living beings are themselves God. Just like this phony Nityananda, who has a temple in Issaquah, now used to be in Bellevue. His favorite phrase was, I did not come here to tell you that I am God, but I came here to tell you that you are God. Wow, people love that, right? Because, yes, I am God, I can dance with the gopis. Oh, wait a minute, there's no gopis, there's no Vaikuntha. I'll merge into the, well, I'll dance with the gopis in this world, yes. Yeah. And then the next point, or that when God incarnates himself, he assumes a material body. Nor do they concern themselves with many obscure speculative, theories, which are in actuality so many stumbling blocks on the path to transcendental understanding. Apart from the class of impersonalists or non-devotees, there are also classes who pose themselves as devotees of the Lord, but at heart maintain the idea of salvation by becoming one with the impersonal Brahman. They wrongly manufacture their own way of devotional service by open debauchery. Debauchery means engaging in illicit sex. Right. And mislead others who are simpletons or debauchees like themselves. So these are people who chant Hare Krishna and talk about Radharani, but their goal is impersonal. In other words, this is explained by Prabhupada. He says they follow the path of Lord Chaitanya, but not the math. Okay, so that has two meanings to it. In other words, they follow the path. You know, they chant Hare Krishna, they dance, they talk about the gopis and Krishna and so forth, but they don't follow the math. So math means, you know, they think everything ends up being one. Or mat, that means following the siddhanta of Lord Chaitanya. They just talk about things, but they don't follow the actual rules and regulations of spiritual life. So they follow the path of Chaitanya, but not the math. Math can be pronounced math, like in numbers, or mat, the disciplic succession. So they're not. So, and these are the most dangerous persons, right? So this is like 8 or 9 different deviations. They pose themselves as devotees of the Lord, but at heart maintain the idea of salvation by becoming one with the impersonal Brahman. Or they wrongly manufacture their own way of devotional service by open debauchery and mislead others who are simpletons or debauchees like themselves. All these non-devotees and debauchees are, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti, duratmas, or crooked souls in the dress of Mahatmas, or great souls. Such non-devotees and debauchees are completely excluded from the list of transcendentalists by the presentation of this particular verse by Sukadeva Goswami. So that's verse 2 to 18. So here we see that there are many misleaders. What is an actual devotee? An actual devotee is a person who actually follows Krishna's instructions strictly and glorifies Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without any illusion that he or she will become Krishna at one point, or any of those 9 deviations that I just explained. So, therefore, the main point being made here is that persons with a poor fund of knowledge cannot have any conception of the Supreme Absolute Truth. They try to stick to the varieties of material enjoyments, although they may flatter themselves as being Brahman-realized souls. Such less intelligent persons cannot have any conception of the Param, or the Supreme Absolute Truth, as mentioned in this verse, and therefore they cannot reach the Supreme. The devotees have full knowledge of the spiritual world, the personality of Godhead, and its transcendental association in unlimited spiritual planets called Vaikuntha Lokas. So this is the main point, that the propaganda by a certain class of impersonalists that spiritual life is void of all varieties is dangerous propaganda to mislead the living beings into becoming more and more attracted to material enjoyments. So this Mayavad philosophy will lead people to become desperate for sense gratification in the material world. Because their explanation is there's no such thing as persons, individual persons and relationships, or Krishna and the gopis and his cowherd boys, etc., in the spiritual world. There's only this impersonal Brahman. So therefore, that is an impetus for people to engage in sense gratification in the material world. And this is exactly what is happening. And we see it all the time, where you hear about all these big gurus that fall down with their disciples or with other people's wives or whatever. Or you see in places like Radhakund and other holy places, you have Babajis who have several women that are his consorts, you know. Okay, so then the mechanical process of yoga, which is, we just heard a description of it. It's for, what was the last sentence of that? It's meant to what?
Hindu spiritual.
By the way, yoga is not Hindu. Let's get that straight. Yoga, and Krishna is not a Hindu, right? Krishna is for everybody. It's not just for Hindus. And yoga is not just for Hindus. It's for everybody. Yeah, go ahead.
A Hindu spiritual and ascetic discipline, a part of which, including breath control, simple meditation, and the adoption of specific bodily postures, is widely practiced for health and relaxation.
Health and relaxation, yeah. No mention of spiritual world, no mention of God, no mention of transcendental bliss. So now let's talk about that, because this is a very important point for understanding what Krishna consciousness is. And now we're going to have some more definitions Prabhupada has given. Prabhupada says, knowledge means knowing things as they are. Did we write that definition down yet? Huh? Yes, okay. And if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are at all unnecessary, naturally a person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. So, in other words, when one has knowledge of Krishna, they begin to eliminate or cancel unwanted things, right? Like, let's say, unwanted things are watching movies and playing video games and listening to nonsense political talks and so forth. There's a whole millions of unwanted things in the material world. So they begin to cancel those unwanted things from their life. And reading Mayavadi books, everything is one, and you can become God. You just do some yoga, you become God, and so forth. So knowledge means to know things as they are. When the conditioned soul finds by culture of knowledge that material necessities are unwanted things, he becomes detached from such unwanted things. This stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that the transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient and should not beg from the rich, blind persons to fulfill the bare necessities of life. Sukadeva Goswami has suggested some alternatives for the bare necessities of life, namely the problem of eating, sleeping, and shelter, but he has not suggested any alternative for sex satisfaction. In other words, yeah, we have to eat, sleep, and we have to have some shelter, right? But he doesn't say that sex is an absolute necessity, like eating and sleeping and shelter, right? So, and the eating and sleeping and shelter, what is his suggestions for it? Well, he says that one can find discarded clothing on the ground and wash it and use that. You don't have to go to Walmart or Costco and buy brand new clothes, right? And then he says that you can also go to a field that has been harvested and always find grains that have not that are still laying on the ground. And you can always maybe find a cave. You can sleep in the cave. Haridas Thakur was sleeping in the cave. You know, that was his house. And there was a poisonous snake that lived there too, but Haridas Thakur was not disturbed by it. So, in other words, Sukadeva Goswami's suggestions seem to be very radical, but he's making the point that we don't have to overexert ourselves for the basic necessities of life. So this stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that the transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient and should not beg from the rich, blind persons to fulfill the bare necessities of life. So this is what you call downsizing in life. Now, let's say you're married, you have kids, and wife or husband, so it's difficult to downsize severely like this. But once the children are grown and husband and wife are alone together, they can begin this process of downsizing to a very low level where you don't need a lot of money, you don't need big houses, big cars, and big food and big stool. You can downsize and live a very, very simple life and have plenty of time for spiritual activity. So Prabhupada says that the transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient. And then Prabhupada writes, one who has the sex desire still with him or her should not at all try to accept the renounced order of life. For one who has not attained to this stage, there's no question of a renounced order of life. So by the gradual process of devotional service, under the guidance of a proper spiritual master, and following the principles of the Bhagavatam, one must be able at least to control the gross sex desire before one accepts the renounced order of life factually. So purification means getting free gradually from sex desire. So we wrote that down also? Yes. And this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord, as described herein. Beginning from the feet, one should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from the sex desire. The smiling face of the Lord is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagvatam, and there are many upstarts who at once try to begin with the 10th canto, and especially with the 5 chapters which delineate the Rasa Lila of the Lord. This is certainly improper. By such improper study or hearing of Bhagavatam, in other words, there's a correct hearing of Bhagavatam and incorrect hearing of Bhagavatam. If one jumps directly to the 10th canto to hear about Krishna's intimate pastimes with the gopis, and that without the instruction of the Guru, is improper hearing of Bhagavatam. In other words, you can go to some Bhagavat Sapta given by some phony, and right away he starts talking about Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. That type of hearing is improper hearing of the Bhagavatam. You have to sit down patiently and go verse by verse, canto by canto, until you come to the 10th canto, where you can begin to hear about Krishna's most intimate pastimes, but you've already understood all of the other pastimes of the Lord in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, in relationship to Lord Shiva, and the different demigods, and all the different pastimes of great devotees like Prahlad Maharaj with Nrsingadev, Dhruva Maharaj with Lord Vishnu and Narada Muni, etc. Once you assimilate all that, then you're purified enough to be able to hear about Krishna's pastimes with his intimate devotees. So there's improper hearing of Bhagavatam. The material opportunists have played havoc by indulging in sex life in the name of Bhagavatam. These are the so-called Babajis and so-called renunciates that live in holy places but actually keep ladies for their entertainment. This vilification of Bhagavatam is rendered by the acts of the so-called devotees. One should be free from all kinds of sex desire before he tries to make a show of recital of Bhagavatam. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura clearly defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. He says, Yata yata discha sudyati vishaya lampatyam tyajati tata tata darayed iti chitta sudhi taratam yenaiva dhyana taratam yam uktam. And as one gets free from the intoxication of sex indulgence by purification of intelligence, one should step forward for the next meditation, or in other words, the progress of meditation on the different limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord should be enhanced in proportion to the progress of purification of the heart. The conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to meditation above the feet of the Lord. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam by them should be restricted to the first and second cantos of the great literature. One must complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then one should be admitted into the realm of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So here we see this gradual development of devotional service and the of Krishna consciousness is very important. Trying to skip steps and jump right away to the most intimate pastimes of the Lord is a great blunder in spiritual life. Okay, so the Mayavadis, they mislead people to become more attracted by material enjoyments. This is an amazing point that Prabhupada is making here. That's why Mayavad philosophy, Lord Chaitanya said, if you take the trouble to hear and try and understand Mayavad philosophy, you'll never understand Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. Never. Okay? So the warning is there that asat sanga tyaga, e vaishnavachara. One gives up the association of unholy people and always accepts the association of genuine devotees. Okay, so are there any questions? Today we did a little bit of what's called going over what we've learned previously, because what happens is these purports are so profound that when we hear them, we say, oh, I understand. But later on, if we look back, we say, wow, my God, I forgot all about that. Right? So these are very important points made by Prabhupada. Are there any questions? You have to speak in the microphone. They follow Chaitanya's path, but not the mass.
Yeah. So are they called the Sahajiyas?
Yes.
They are the Sahajiyas. Okay.
Sahajas.
Sahajiyas. Okay.
Sahajas.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. They dress like devotees. They chant Hare Krishna. And then afterwards, they philander. They smoke biddies. They smoke marijuana, maybe. Yeah. They're having a good time. Doing mischief. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I met a person like that once. He would chant Hare Krishna very nicely, you know, but he had very bad habits, you know, drinking, philandering, very bad. And it's hard to understand how he can do both. He wasn't initiated in ISKCON. He was born in a traditional Sahaja Apasiddhanta, lineage, claiming a bodily relationship with either Lord Chaitanya or Nityananda or Advaitacharya. Right. But they chanted really nicely.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, you know, there's several instances, like some devotees very elevated, but they do their bhajan, you know, privately. They don't expose themselves to others, and they do like crazy stuff, you know.
Like?
You know, for example, like very difficult to understand sometimes certain behavior of certain Vaishnavas. Like it's in Chaitanya Chanta, Vaishnava Kiya Mudra, Bujay, Bujyana Bujay. You know that famous verse?
No.
Yeah. Vaishnava Kiya Mudra, Bujyana Bujay. However learned one may be, he can never understand the behavior of Vaishnava.
Oh no, that verse, yeah. I didn't understand the way you were pronouncing it. Yeah. In other words, ordinary people cannot understand the life and activities of a pure devotee. They just, like for example, one example is one time Lord Chaitanya, who was still married and a teacher, and he had a lot of students, many students for Sanskrit and so forth. One time he was feeling ecstasy of the gopis, so he started chanting Gopi, Gopi, Gopi. And some of his students had heard him. They said, stop doing that. You're supposed to chant Hare Krishna, you're not supposed to chant Gopi, Gopi, Gopi. And Lord Chaitanya got upset because they interrupted his ecstatic feelings. And at that point he decided to take sannyas because the people didn't understand what he was doing, and they were misinterpreting it, and then insulting him. So to stop people from insulting him, he took sannyas, so that they would just give him genuine respect, or general respect, and then he also adopted Mayavad sannyas, so that people would respect him and not make this mistake of criticizing him. And because by criticizing him, they would, fall down and stay trapped in this process of birth and death. So that's one example. They can't understand the activities of a pure devotee. There are other examples also.
The two very vivid examples, like Pundarak Vinyanidhi and even Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda. There was one devotee, this is in Bhakti Radnagar, it's a nice Shastra, Vaishnava Shastra, about the associate Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu after Mahaprabhu left. So I think it's written by Srinivas. No, this is Narahari Sarakar. So one devotee, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengal, I mean, really genuine devotee Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But that time Mahaprabhu was staying in Purushottam Dham as a sannyasi. So this Lord Nityananda came back to Bengal to spread the glories of Premanam
Lord
Sankirtan.
Chaitanya told him to do that, yeah.
But his behavior, Lord Nityananda, was very difficult for people to understand. Very difficult. Some people, they couldn't understand. Even some genuine devotees, they couldn't understand, because sometimes Lord Nityananda is avadut. He's avadut, right? Lord Nityananda. So this devotee was, in his mind, he was trying to understand how really to relate to Lord Nityananda in terms of his behavior. So it became like he was so distressed, and then he didn't want to be offensive. And then he decided, no, I must go to Purushottam Dham to meet my Lord Chaitanya, because I can't understand Nityananda. I'm committing offenses in my mind when I see his behavior. And then he went there, but he was really humble, and Mahaprabhu knows very well, he's Supreme Lord. He's a very great devotee of himself. And then he received them there. And then this devotee expressed all his heart, He said, my Lord, I don't understand. Please help me. I don't know. I try my best, I can understand Lord Nityananda behavior. The Mahaprabhu was pleased with that. He said, yes, you cannot understand. You cannot understand. But Mahaprabhu showed his mercy on him, and then the devotee was blessed, and all these...
Well, what was the behavior that he didn't understand?
Well, Lord Nityananda, sometimes, he does things like very uncommon, like but unusual. Sometimes you behave like sannyasi, sometimes you behave like grihastha, and sometimes, so many other things, like appears to be like mundane, but it's very difficult.
Like, for example, Lord Ramachandra, after Sita was kidnapped, he was walking around the forest and crying and saying, "Where is Sita Devi?" So he looks like an ordinary man. But actually, and Ravana was convinced that he's not some supreme personality of God. He's just an ordinary guy. Look, he doesn't have a kingdom, doesn't have an army, and he's walking around looking for his wife, doesn't know where his wife is. So he's just an ordinary guy. And he explained this to Sita Devi. He says, your husband is a wimp. He's nobody. And he'll never be able, even the demigods can't come to Lanka. So how is he going to come here? And he doesn't have a treasury, he doesn't have an army, and she rejected it. She said, you don't know my husband. I said, and you don't give me back to my husband, he's going to come here and destroy your whole dynasty. And that's exactly what happened. But Ravana couldn't understand the activities of the Lord.
But I remember some of the things of Lord Nityananda, for instance, used to chew pan all the time, chew pan, bidi, and he also sometimes he used to be like renounce, like sannyasi, and then next time he's like after women, something like this, like whatever. Even when he used to go to with Haridas Thakur to preach, and then when you see a woman, can you marry me, please?
Can you what?
Can you marry me? Can become.
Where'd you read that?
Oh, it's in the it's on Chaitanya Bhagavat, and also in this book, Bhakti Ranakar, it's sanctioned by Prabhupada, nice book. So it's there. So it's those kind of things that Lord Nityananda used to do. But the one Mahaprabhu told this devotee, said that whatever Nityananda does is not from this world. Is completely. And then they gave example of like Lord Shiva drank the ocean poison. Nobody else can do that. And so, like even Prabhupada used to say also about Jesus Christ that if Jesus Christ ate fish, but he's very powerful, his sin can be destroyed, but no ordinary person. So things like this. Right?
No, Prabhupada said if you can multiply 4 fish to feed 4,000 people, you can also eat fish.
Right.
If you can't do it, then don't pretend that you are some kind of avatar. Okay.
So it's very, how to say, very intricate situation. So I think the whole idea is that we should, when we see somebody, whatever his behavior, we should pay respect in distance, not associate, but we respect the person from far. Is that correct? You pay respect?
That's different. That's in the case of a person who's actually deviating from Krishna consciousness or not acting properly with other devotees. But in the case of Lord Nityananda or Lord Shiva, who are actually they have many of the powers of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nityananda does completely, but Lord Shiva has partially the powers of Krishna, up to 84%. One should not try and imitate them. One should accept that they are much more, let's say, powerful, and therefore they should be respected, even though we don't understand their behavior. Yeah.
Now, in terms of association, you say somebody is there.
That's the person who's not acting properly. like deviating from Krishna consciousness. Like, for example, a person who worships the deity but is not respectful with other devotees, that type of person you keep your distance from, respect them, but not associate closely with them. Right? So, and then there are people who don't control their anger. They become very angry sometimes and insulting or whatever. So, although they're chanting Hare Krishna, so you understand that they're on a lower level, like Kanishta Adhikari. So you give your respect to such people, but you don't closely associate with them. That's different than, you're not going to say, well, because Nityananda is a little bit erratic in his behavior, I'm not going to associate with him. No, that's not the same thing. See my point?
Yeah. No, they are different.
Yeah.
About Nityananda, just different. That's what that devotee went to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to clarify his misunderstanding or his
Yes.